King Charles III and Queen Camilla completed a historic visit to the Holy See just a few days ago. And in a landmark moment, King Charles became the first head of the Church of England to pray publicly with the Pope. It had been nearly 500 years since King Henry VIII broke from Rome and formed the Anglican Church. And with me now to discuss this historic trip is Kelsey Gussie. Welcome to One Nation Under God on NewsNation, Kelsey.
Thank you so much for having me, Susie.
So Kelsey works for the Vatican and did the live commentary and translation of that historic prayer service in the Sistine Chapel for Vatican News. So Kelsey, let's start there with that beautiful prayer service. Tell us what happened during the service and what the significance of the Sistine Chapel is in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I mean, the prayer service in the Sistine Chapel was beautiful, as you mentioned, because it was such a historic moment. And we saw in the entrance, even just with the king and the queen coming into the Sistine Chapel, and then Pope Leo joining them later, it was so unique to have the head of the Anglican Church and the head of the Catholic Church in the place where Catholics watch, as we saw earlier this year, for the election of a new pope. And so to see that combination, of these two major churches, the heads of these two major churches, in this very significant, historically, theologically, but also even artistically, place in Rome was really beautiful. And in the service, it was, the simple midday prayer, the Liturgy of the Hours, but the fact that Pope Leo was joined with also an Anglican reverend, that was just beautiful to see the fact that these two churches could come together in such a unique and historic place, but then also to see King Charles and Queen Camilla actually praying as well in the midday prayer really just showed that this trip was very much about ecumenism and making steps towards Christian unity.
Absolutely, I agree. That was such a moving thing to see because really, the Archbishop, I believe it was the Archbishop of York, he was
Yes.
standing there alongside the Pope in this setting, this beautiful solemn setting of the Sistine Chapel, and to see them as equals and sort of, conducting the prayer service. I think that was just really such a significant, so much symbolism. Obviously, 500 years of, sometimes very fractious relationship. It was just very, very historic.
I have to
Wouldn't you say?
agree. And yeah, I have to agree. And it's just, it was special too, because of course the themes for this visit with Queen Camilla and King Charles, started with Pope Francis because it was supposed to be originally in April, but then due to Pope Francis' ill health, it was postponed. But we still saw these pillars kind of staying with the visit. So care for creation and ecumenism. And I think in the Sistine Chapel too, having these two themes was extra evident because we have the creation of Adam in the top where we see God and Adam reaching out. We have different depictions of gospel passages, but then also prophets and Old Testament scenes that are very much focused on the Jews and our history as Catholics, but back when we were part of Judaism. But then also just seeing, the judgment, the last judgment, the last judgment in the back of the Sistine Chapel. All of this as the context was just really beautiful to see these two heads coming together to participate in an event that had never been seen in our lifetime and many lifetimes before us. So it was actually really beautiful.
Yeah, very beautiful. You make such a good point. So for our viewers who may not know, the Sistine Chapel is, the most important works or most well-known works are of Michelangelo, and of course on the ceiling, which is, I believe, the story of Genesis, right?
Mhm.
And on the sides of the chapel are also decorated by other artists who came after him. And as you say, I didn't, that's such a good point, that care of the environment was one of the themes of this trip, and the Sistine Chapel couldn't have been a more appropriate setting in terms of the artistic depiction of creation, of the creation of man, right, on the ceiling. as well as other significant scenes. So that's really what a perfect setting.
I agree.
We saw the Swiss Guard come out, and of
Hmm.
course, the world loves the Swiss Guard because of their colorful
Yes.
uniforms and just there's so much visual flair. But what can you tell us? What kind of role does the Swiss Guard play in these state visits? We see them come out and march. In this case, I believe it was in the Cortile di San Damaso, which is in the Apostolic Palace, right?
Yeah, right outside, and that's where all the official state visitors, whoever they may be, prime ministers, kings, queens, that's where they come in. And you're right that the Swiss Guard is probably one of the most recognizable things of the Vatican and of Rome. And for these visits, what's really interesting to see is them coming out in, I mean, full ceremonial garb, and you have also the band playing, which for this visit was extra special because you had the Swiss Guard band playing God Save the King, which is not something you would typically hear the Swiss Guard band play, of course. But it just showed that the Pope is, yes, the head of the Catholic Church, but he's also the head of state for the Vatican. And so the Swiss Guards are there, obviously, to welcome in and to begin that official state visit. But it's really beautiful to see them come, welcome the king and queen, have that moment where the band plays, and then the king and queen were brought into the Apostolic Palace to then meet with Pope Leo. And so I think seeing the Swiss Guards, people recognize that that means the Pope is near, the Pope is about to appear, but it signifies that yes, this is also a state important visit, not just the church visit.
Yeah, and a lot of Americans forget that, as you said, that the Pope is also the head of state, and the Vatican is its own, city state separate from
Mhm.
Italy. So therefore, he represents that government, the Vatican's government,
Yeah.
and really, in a lot of ways, of course, over the centuries, but even in recent years, the Pope has played a key role in terms of geopolitics, in terms of helping to negotiate different agreements, peace, pushing for peace, of course, always in places where there's war. So the Pope not only is a religious, figurehead, but he's also a geopolitical head. And the
Yeah.
Vatican, is one of the most ancient places where diplomacy has taken place over the centuries, maybe even invented diplomacy, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very unique duality of the Pope, religious but then also political. And I think yeah, having a state visit like this with another man who's also the head of state in that sense, the figurehead, but then also the head of the Anglican Church is just a beautiful thing to see that balance between the two. A very unique balance, I would say, not very common for
Yeah.
a lot of heads of state.
Right, absolutely. And one thing that was also interesting is that Queen Camilla wore black. Now, I believe heads of states or consorts always wear black on official visits to the Vatican. Is that the case?
Yeah, there's only a certain number of women. I think it's 7 women that are actually allowed to wear white in the presence of a pope, and it's other queens as well. But it's as you mentioned, Camilla is the queen consort, and so that definitely does offer a differentiation. But it was unique that she wore the black as opposed to again other queens. I think it was a Queen of Luxembourg. I'm not sure about that one, but there's a certain number of women who are allowed to wear white in the presence of the pope, but it's not many people.
Yeah, I think it's Catholic monarchs, right?
Mhm.
Only. So another part of this visit, which was so interesting, was a visit to St. Paul outside the wall, and an exchange or the bestowing on of a title on King Charles. Tell us about that part of the ceremony and what that title means.
Well, what I think most people probably wouldn't have known before last Thursday is the fact that there was originally a connection between the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls and the British monarchs. So prior to the split, the Reformation, there was that connection where the British monarchs were actually considered the protectors of that basilica. And so during that state visit, as we saw with King Charles, he went back to that basilica, and I mean, with the approval of the Pope and the encouragement of the archpriest there, they were able to confer the title of Royal Confrater or Confrater. And that was a special title that he received during that ceremony. But then that that link, that connection between the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church continued with the title, but then also he received, or he installed, this special chair designed specifically for that moment, which had this motto, which I think summarizes the whole idea of ecumenism in this visit, which was ut unum cinct, which means that they may be one, from the Gospel of John. And I mean, that's, again, that sums it up. The fact that the idea is to draw and reignite this relationship between the two churches, which was so evident in the entire visit, but that specific experience, that specific ceremony in the basilica, really focused on reestablishing that tie between the two churches.
And during the visit and during these solemn services, could you tell what impact the trip had on King Charles and on the Pope? Separately. I mean, what was the reaction? What was the body language? How was their rapport? What was the atmosphere?
I mean, you could see definitely in the Sistine Chapel that it was definitely a solemn ceremony, a solemn prayer. But also, as they walked out of the basilica, it was really beautiful to see them just walking. Or sorry, excuse me. As they walked out of the Sistine Chapel, it was just really beautiful to see the two of them walking and talking like they were catching up. And
Yeah.
so it was definitely evident that it was a special moment for the two of them as well, and also being able to speak in English, both of their native tongues. And so, yeah, it was very beautiful to see. And I think in the ceremony at the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, you could see too the fact that, I mean, King Charles was there in front of everyone, and it was, again, a very solemn moment, but something that was also very special for him as well.
Yes, yeah. He has spoken about his personal faith over the years, but in recent years, these last 2 years, he's been dealing with a cancer diagnosis. Of course, there's been, controversy and scandal within his own family with Prince Harry, and in recent days, actually, with Prince Andrew, but King Charles has been quite forthright about his faith, about his Christian faith, and his particular interest in the Eastern churches and Orthodox churches. Did he mention anything about his faith during the official um, speeches throughout the visit to the Vatican?
Well, and here I'll reference something that we wrote, talking to, actually, I'm gonna get his name right, Father Martin Brown, who actually is an official for the dicastery for promoting Christian unity, and he talked about the fact that for King Charles as the supreme governor of the Church of England, he wanted to have a spiritual aspect to the state visit. So it wasn't just about, okay, I'm going to visit as the head of state, but also to have this visit where it was a spiritual thing as well, a spiritual union between the two churches. And so they made sure, because this was the first time, as we said at the beginning, that the state visit also had prayer services involved. And so, as Father Brown said, it was something that King Charles wanted. It wasn't just a normal state visit where you go and talk about politics, but he wanted to have some aspect where it was tied to his faith, to our faith.
Right, yeah. And for Pope Leo as well, I mean, we're about at the 6-month mark since he's become Pope. And of course, all eyes are on him. I feel like the media, sort of the honeymoon maybe is a little bit over in the sense now people are really focusing on what he's saying, but to see him in that role, he really looked very comfortable, very natural. Any thoughts about how he what his sort of demeanor was during this very solemn visit?
Yeah, this part I don't think I'm allowed to comment on, just because then I'd be speculating on what the Pope thinks.
Okay, sure, sure, got it. Okay.
Sorry about that.
So, what about so this trip was about unity. So, Christian unity, you mentioned that was one of the main themes, that the one of the two themes. But there's still a gulf between the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church. But do you expect to see, was there any talk during this trip in terms of concrete steps towards unity? Could there be another joint prayer service in the future between the Anglican and the Catholic churches?
That I think would have to wait and see, but I definitely think that this trip we saw a lot of connections between the two churches that definitely were steps in the right direction, in the sense that, I mean, in both the prayer service and in the ceremony, there was a recurring figure, which I don't think we've talked about, the Saint John Henry Newman, which was a uniting factor for the Anglican Church and Catholicism. And the fact that, I mean, for anyone who might not know him, he was Anglican for half his life before he converted to Catholicism. He eventually became, a priest and then a cardinal, and he kind of symbolizes that in between, that unity of Anglicanism and Catholicism, because he was an Englishman as well, and he understood the Anglican faith, but then he was a Catholic. And even in the prayer service in the Sistine Chapel, the first hymn that was sung, the English translation was actually done by Saint John Henry Newman. And I think that was really special because it showed there was this intertwining, including of these little aspects that most people probably wouldn't even notice, but it showed that we were trying to combine the two, or make it so that the Anglicans present, okay, there's a connection that I can feel comfortable with, that I might know St. John Henry Newman. We're in the Sistine Chapel, as we mentioned, very important for Catholics. And we also, I mean, with St. John Henry Newman and these steps leading to Christian unity, which again, only time will tell. But I mean, King Charles, when he was prince, attended the canonization of John Henry Newman in 2019. And we
Yeah.
also know that a delegation from the Anglican Church should be there at the on November 1st, when John Henry Newman is named a doctor of the church. So I think these are just all little moments and steps that we're seeing that, yeah, I mean, this was a good visit. This really helped reignite again that relationship that the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church have tried to maintain, but again, something that we're working on both sides.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think that was a great gesture of respect on, at the time, Prince Charles's part to attend in an official capacity. That was very significant. And I think it does show a lot that there's been so much progress on this road to unity, and then the relationship and just the public nature. I mean, this was, there was so much interest in the US. Of course, when you show these beautiful places, the Sistine Chapel, the pomp and circumstance of the Vatican, people are very interested. But so I think that both King Charles and Pope Leo really have a very keen sense that this will have a big impact on the world, and this is a not just this was going to impact minds and hearts who see this great imagery.
I would agree. Yeah, that's, I think, a lasting thing that will stay in all of our minds, is the fact that there was this joint effort to include things from Anglicanism, Catholicism, and just seeing again how the two heads of state and heads of churches responded to both the prayer service and the ceremony in the basilica.
And Kelsey, for our viewers, tell them where they can find future events that the Vatican puts on, and events that you may do translation or commentary for, and sort of where people can find Vatican content, official Vatican content.
Yeah, so we have Vatican News, and it's in all languages. So if you're not English speaking, we have, I think it's 58 languages. And so VaticanNews.com, that's where we write articles. You also have live broadcasts of different papal events, as well as Vatican.va, which is again a lot of the full speeches of the Pope and different events. But that's where you can find pretty much everything related to the Vatican, the Pope, the Church as a whole.
And there's a YouTube page as well, right? The Vatican News has a
YouTube
YouTube
page.
page. Okay.
There's a Twitter account, X, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us pretty much anywhere. Just search Vatican News.
Okay, that might surprise some people that the Vatican is all over
Yeah.
social media, all over all modern forms of communication. One just quick question that I forgot to ask you is that what was the impact in the Italian press of this visit? Did it get I think that the Italian press is much more aware maybe of all the intricacies between Catholicism and the break with the Anglican Church. How was it received in the Italian media?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely. I think we have to remember too that, so with Italian media, especially Italian media here close to the Vatican, it's all important. For all of us that cover the Vatican, anything with the Pope is very exciting, very interesting. And so, I mean, of course, they covered it. It was all over the news. It was the news of the day for sure, seeing this historic moment between the two heads of state and heads of church. So it was definitely still in the headlines as well.
That's great. And Kelsey, give us an idea of what it's like, how long you've been working for the Vatican and what that experience is like as an American.
Yeah, so I've been with the Vatican just over a year, just celebrated my 1 year anniversary, and it's a very unique experience. I would definitely say you learn so much about journalism, of course, but then about the Vatican. And I mean, as a Catholic, it's extra special to just see and be a part of something so close to my faith. It's unique to be able to follow the Pope as in depth as I'm able to, because for sure it's my job to definitely know what's going on with the Pope, what he's doing, what he's saying, but it's definitely more intense following him than I would have if I'm not a journalist. But I have to say that's the beauty of it, is that you just learn so much. And being an American with an American Pope, I think just it makes it more personal, because it's a Pope that, grew up in the same kind of environment as I did, as we both did, living in the States. He knows the culture that we come from. And I think we see that, in how he is, in his speeches. And yeah, I think it's really beautiful to just have this experience working in the Vatican so close to the first American born Pope.
Yeah, you're really witnessing history, right?
Hmm.
And I
Yeah,
wonder
definitely.
And I wonder how, Italy always has, in general, Italians have a lot of affection for Americans. Have Italians taken to Pope Leo as well? They're used to, I mean, there have been a few non-Italian popes in recent years, but the papacy is very much an Italian, in a lot of ways, an Italian institution. How have they taken to Pope Leo?
Yeah, I think it's for everyone. I think, there's, as you mentioned, we're in the 6 months, or about 6 months. And so everyone's just getting to know him. He's getting to know the job. And yeah, for Italians, I have to say, I mean, I think it's just they're happy to have a Pope who speaks Italian well. It's he's definitely a pope that enjoys being with people, as we see the general audiences as well. So whether you might be Italian, you might be American, you might be Spanish, you might be from anywhere, he definitely takes the time in the audiences to greet people and shake their hands, kiss babies, catch things that are thrown at him. So I think he's just a man who loves his faith and loves the people he's around.
Yeah, he seems like he is very just peaceful and very comfortable in his skin, and I think that you really see that as he's made the transition. And I would love to tell him that the he makes the Chicago news every single week in some way or another, whether it's during catching something during
Right,
one of the audiences. So the Chicago media is definitely very proud to
for
have
sure.
a pope from their city.
For sure. I mean, how could you not? That's pretty cool to be able to
Yeah.
say he was once here, he once did this, went to that park or ate here. It's just amazing.
Yeah, amazing, amazing historic time. So, anyway, Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.